while the hope of endless glory fills my heart with joy and love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind me closer still to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above.
Amen. Thank you.
How about one last one, right? 448?
Okay. What? Which one? 428? 448.
448.
448.
Man, I think that too. It's amazing what humidity does.
Only a music here would pick it up.
Oh, it's a lot better, yeah. Heard my tambourine right. Can't remember the timing. Oh, when shall I see Jesus and reign with him above, and shall hear the trumpet sound in that morning, and from the flowing fountain drink everlasting love, and shall hear the trumpet sound in that morning. Oh, shout glory, for I shall mount above the skies when I hear the trumpet sound in that morning. Gird on the gospel armor of faith and hope and love, and you'll hear the trumpet sound in that morning. And when the combat's ended, he'll carry you above, and you'll hear the trumpet sound in that morning. Oh, shout glory, for I shall mount above the skies when I hear the trumpet sound in that morning. Our ears shall hear with transport the hosts of heaven sing, and shall hear the trumpet sound in that morning. Our tongue shall chant the glories of our immortal King, and shall hear the trumpet sound in that morning. Oh, shout glory, for I shall mount above the skies when I hear the trumpet sound in that morning.
We can do that every week.
Thank you,
We
Scott.
want you to do that for us every week.
That's a good one, isn't it?
Every Vespers. That's your
That's a goodie.
responsibility. I've just given it to you. I'm sorry, you know I've been without people all week. I talk to my, I get here, I get excited.
What was that song in the 200s that we sang? 200 and
216, was it?
I think so.
Yeah.
216.
When the roll is called up yonder. 216.
260.
When the roll is called up yonder.
So everyone is up on our story, correct?
Yes.
All right. So our chapter today is entitled The Unknown Sailor. For 4 years, war raged. Air raid sirens screamed at night. Refugees flowed endlessly through the city. The wounded crowded the military hospitals. War orphans multiplied. We kept more than busy caring for all these unfortunate people. By 1944, our life had become a hectic tussle to fit studies in with volunteer service, night calls, emergencies, and a few hours of uneasy sleep. And added to this, gnawing hunger pains with weakness and dizzy spells. Wherever there was a need, we had to go, and we were glad to go. But sometimes our bodies could scarcely obey orders anymore. The highlight of each school day was the arrival of the mailman. Mail was the only thing that was plentiful besides duties. I liked letters and I liked to write. I would write in the bomb shelter at night during class recess whenever I could find an unoccupied minute. Almost daily I received a handful of mail from friends, including soldiers and officers. We knew our boys waited for messages from home, and we all tried our best not to make them wait. Mail did not always bring sunshine. Often it brought heartache. Often a letter addressed to a soldier would be returned to the sender, stamped Gefallen für and Vaterland, died for the fur and fatherland. How these few words under the name of the soldier would blow out the light in our hearts and eyes. Many of these boys had worked together with me in the Hitler Youth Organization, and when they had left for military training and fighting front, I had promised to write faithfully, and I had kept my promise to all of them. The first of my letters to be returned was one addressed to Fluntel, a friend of my early teens, a tall blonde youth. He had joined the SS troops. I had liked and admired him for his striking smile, his frank blue eyes and bubbling enthusiasm, and his sincerity. For weeks I couldn't believe he was dead. No, I didn't cry. A Nazi youth was not supposed to cry, for it was the highest fulfillment and greatest honor to die for our cause. I knew that Fluntel had believed in his calling, and most likely had died with a hail for the fur on his lips. Was not self-sacrifice the greatest goal for any human being? Would tears not degrade his noble death? I had controlled my tears, but I could not control the numbness in my soul. He had been the only son of aged parents. Why did he have to die? Why was life such a puzzle? Several times my letters to soldiers came back with that fateful mark on them. Twice the stamp had been differently worded. Vermisst and der Russian camp front, missing at the Russian front. This was more dreaded than the death note, for it spelled uncertainty, imprisonment, Siberia. It kept the people in the homeland in mental agony for years, hoping that in some way the missing boy might survive and return home. Mail helped to keep the war going. As everybody knew, headquarters had orders that in case of emergency, mail be delivered even if food was left behind. The boys could stand hunger as long as they had mail, and it worked both ways. How much easier it was for us to forget the meager lunch, the growling stomach, when we had interesting letters to read. One spring day in 1942, I slipped out of class to receive my mail. Among the letters, I noticed a long, dignified white envelope with strange handwriting on it. I couldn't make out the name of the sender. I checked the address again to make sure the letter was for me, and it was. I tore the envelope open and started to read. Then I sat down with an amused grin and called for a girlfriend to come and see. Well, who would have thought of that? Several months before, Annalise, my girlfriend, and I had written letters addressed to an unknown soldier. Someone at Hitler's headquarters had started a campaign for more letter writing from the home line and fighting front, and had suggested the writing to unknown soldiers. Since mail to the fighting forces had been marked field post or field mail and did not require postage, the idea had caught fire. Almost everybody was writing to at least one unknown soldier. On a rainy day, Annalise and I each wrote a letter to an unknown soldier whom we imagined as a handsome, dashing hero. Since I liked the looks of our dark blue-eyed gold Navy uniforms best, and none of my friends had ever joined the Navy, the normal choice for most of the SS, I had marked my dainty little letter to an unknown sailor of the German Navy. Then we had dropped our letters into the mailbox, laughing gaily with the excitement of the idea. Nothing came of the letters, just as we had expected, and soon we dismissed the incident from our minds. From the beginning we had felt uneasy over it anyway. It seemed strange to write a letter to a man without being asked by him. This didn't fit into our concept of etiquette or our strict code of proud womanhood. 6 months later, I held the answer to my forgotten letter in my hand, and my curious classmate had kindly offered to help me decipher anything I couldn't read. Its writer must be a nice, polite man, intelligent, self-confident, and friendly, I decided. I couldn't help being impressed. He wrote from an officer's training camp, and he sounded busy and ambitious. I answered immediately, and he replied promptly. From letter to letter, my Navy boy began to occupy a more special place in my heart. His big, self-confident handwriting demanded a lot of stationery. His letters were soon known to our mailman and to our matron for their bulkiness. At first, we both shied away from mentioning any feelings we might have developed for each other, while exchanging our letters more and more frequently. How much those letters really meant to me, I recognized after we had corresponded for more than a year. Suddenly, the bulky letters stopped. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks passed. I waited and I worried. Would my last letter to him come back someday with that dreaded stamp on it, vermissed? I feared to ask for my mail. Eagerly I listened to the Navy news during radio hour on the evening, especially the U-boat news. Rudy had become a third officer on a U-boat that year, and I knew something about the odds against those men. The girls had begun to tease me in a sympathetic sort of way. Slightly amused that I would worry too much about an unknown man, I denied my concern too loudly and convinced nobody. I began to argue with myself. Was I not being ridiculous? All I knew of him was what he had sent in those bulky letters, plus a picture and a few books. Why should I worry so much about a person whom I had never seen and whom I might never meet? Someone who probably cared nothing about me, or did he care, as I did? Why did he write so often and such long letters? Maybe his boat was lost, or maybe he had just decided to stop writing. No, deep inside I knew that my young officer was not dead. He couldn't be. I had to meet him someday, somewhere. He had become a part of my life, and I had to believe in him and his future. When after long weeks his next letter arrived, the matron waited until after dinner to give it to me. I was so skinny, she said she knew I wouldn't have bothered to eat if I had had my 20-page letter to read. I tore the parcel letter open. I struggled to hold back the happy tears and cared nothing for the teasing remarks of my friends. I had a letter to read, and I read it hurriedly the first time, carefully and slowly the second and third time. Rudy had been out for many weeks. Patrol, they called it when the boats cruised the ocean and hunted convoys. His letter was a diary. He had had no opportunity to mail it for weeks. Certain things they were forbidden to mention. But whatever was permissible, he told. I never cared how many ships they had torpedoed or where his boat had operated. All I wanted to know was about him personally. In one part of his letter he wrote, "When I stand on the bridge during the long hours of my night watch, I look up to see the stars, and I wonder, Marianne, if you are asleep or if you're looking at the same stars. Someday, my dear pen pal, we are going to meet each other, and I cannot wait to see you." That night I looked at his picture for a long, long time. I knew every line of his face by heart, but I had to study it anew. The picture told me, as so often before, that he had dark, soft eyes and a very sweet smile, but I had no idea how his voice sounded, how tall he was, or how he walked or laughed. After I had put the picture down and turned out the lights, I slipped quietly to the window behind my bed and lifted the tight shades a few centimeters. I knew it was against the rules, for every house in the country had to be darkened. At night, any beam of light could betray human dwellings to the bombers, which found their targets anyway with deadly precision, night after night. Nobody in his right mind ever lifted a shade before morning dawn, but I had to. I had to see the stars just once in a while, for they had been my friends since earliest childhood. I had watched those wandering lights from my bed in the hayloft many a night, and in my heart had talked with them. Now it was time to talk to the stars again. I had greetings to send. Some were to a small U-boat, sailed on a wide ocean. On it was a young Navy officer with brown eyes and a high, intelligent forehead. He might look up to the stars tonight. Would the stars take my greetings to him? Would the stars tell him of the shy love in my heart and the dreams I couldn't help dreaming? Never would I dare to put my feelings into words. Our friendship seemed so precious and frail. Words could have destroyed the beauty of it. Fortune betrayed us. In the spring of 1944, we had begun our third year of writing, and we still could only dream and wonder, would we ever meet? What would we say? As total war raged that summer, we were shipped out of the city into Sudeten Mountains. Germany had forgotten what vacation meant, so had we. I was made leader of a group of girls engaged to hard farm labor. Our male farmhands were somewhere in fighting fronts. Desperately the women planted and hoed and harvested, learning to do men's work and to do it very fast. Our arms ached as we raked and pulled and lifted from early morning until late afternoon. But we all understood. The farm wife where I worked was sweet and motherly, but she looked haggard and overworked. Each day she slipped some extra food into my apron pocket. I tried to return my appreciation in diligent labor. We became the best of friends. The extra food, the summer sun, and the large amounts of exercise in the fresh air did me many favors. No longer so skinny, I also acquired a healthy tan. My hair, worn in a page boy style, had grown long over my shoulders, and sun had bleached it almost blonde. War seemed far away in our out-of-the-way camp. No air raids disturbed us as we slept in the quietness of the whispering evergreen woods. Every morning the singing birds awakened us. The morning dew glistened like 1,000 diamonds over the pastures when we marched out to the villages out of the villages to work. When we stood around the flagpole to salute, our voices shouted the pledge with vigor. This was the best summer I had had for years. And Rudy still wrote long letters regularly. Late one afternoon, we checked in from the village, took ice-cold showers, and prepared for supper and evening training. Most of the girls gathered at the athletic field around a girl with an accordion for square dancing and happy chatter. It was late because of duties. I was late because of duties. I carried as a sub-leader and hummed a tune while brushing my hair and creaming my sunburned arms. Then I fell to musing again. I hadn't heard from Rudy for a while and tried hard not to worry. That I wouldn't get that boy out of my head was almost disgusting. It was almost time to leave for the city again, so we would have to pack and return to Prague. How much I hated to leave. The summer had been so peaceful. Sure, there had been some friction with the Fuhrer. She was the assistant camp director, and she and I had not been able to get along. But outside of that, it had been a dream of a summer. The only thing missing to make everything perfect would have been a visit from, well, no sense in wishing again. Rudy would never be able to come to this remote place. Why should he, anyway? Starting down the stairway opposite the entrance, I whistled a tune and threw my long hair back resolutely, tossing my head to indicate the determinedness to stop my silly dreaming. Sorry. Suddenly I stopped short. Through the open door stepped a Navy officer. His eyes looked familiar, and suddenly I knew who that man was. I turned in panic and fled to my quarters. I don't know why you want me to read. I can't read it any better than you without crying.
I'm hoping you cry.
There I sat on the edge of my cot and tried to control my beating heart and racing thoughts. I hadn't been so scared in all my life. What if he didn't like my looks? What if I begin to brush my hair again, reset my service pin and on my blue house uniform, check myself for invisible spots and blemishes? Presently I heard my name being called. Summoning all the courage I could find, I walked slowly down the stairs and reported respectfully to the leader in charge. With an amused twinkle in her eye, she pointed to the Navy man and said, "You have a visitor, Marianne. Come and welcome him." I looked fully into his smiling face and extended my hand to him. Rudy smiled broadly and said, just a shade too lightly, "Well, here I am, little Hansi." I nodded and managed to stammer, "Yes, I can see it." I could feel myself blushing. Since my superior had never seen me speechless or self-conscious before, she first looked puzzled and suddenly laughed a hearty laugh. That seemed to break the tension in the room. Rudy and I also began to laugh, and I finally managed enough self-compassion to welcome him and invite him to join the group outside under the big tree where everybody square danced. Suddenly aware of the sensation Rudy's appearance created, I got my self-confidence back quickly. Proudly I introduced him to my friends, and behind his back gave me little signs of approval or envy. I grinned with delight. When the supper bell called, Rudy was invited to dine with us. He was seated beside the camp director, a woman of high leadership rank and strict manners. I fulfilled my supervising duties, but I couldn't stop my heart from beating loudly, especially when I stole glances across at Rudy's place. A born charmer, he carried on a gallant conversation with the lady of the camp, and at the same time he watched me closely with, it seemed to me, a look of slight amusement. By the end of the meal, the Fern of the camp was so favorably impressed by his gentle, manly behavior that she had signed me off from further duty for the evening and the next day, even before I dared ask, since she had never done such a thing before. This created an even bigger sensation among the girls. After I had changed into my uniform and returned, we walked slowly out, aware that many eyes watched us. Once outside the campus, we turned and walked toward the sunset. Everything around us seemed enchanted, glowing with golden red and purple. A strange silence seemed to walk between us. Rudy took my hand and helped me up the hill. We stood there for a long time, watching the fading colors of the evening sky. We both had felt so close to each other in the letters. Though we had never mentioned this in words, our deep feelings was there between the lines of every page. Now we recognized that the hour of testing of our friendship had come. Both of us feared that a wrong word or an untrue gesture would break the tender thread. Our friendship now had to face reality. I did not look up as I felt Rudy's eye searching my profile. Slowly the golden twilight turned into velvety darkness. "Are you disappointed, little Hansi?" Rudy asked softly. I shook my head too vigorously and quickly replied, "No. Are you, Rudy?" He denied it too. We both knew we were lying. Yes, we both were disappointed. It wasn't that either of us didn't like the other. We were just different from what the other had expected. Dreams are perfect. Humans never are. 2.5 years of unreal friendship had suddenly come to an end, and our dreams were irretrievably gone. Were our ties strong enough to face reality, to go on? We determined to give it a try. Sitting on a log, we began to talk. I had so many questions to ask, and I sat and listened. And as he told me about his life, his voice sounded soft and kind. He acted so young and yet mature at the same time. I watched the stars appear above us one by one until the night sky was a diamond-sparkled dome that surrounded us with new assurance. No, we had not been disappointed after all. Suddenly I knew that I had not, for he really was as I had pictured him all along. Suddenly I felt, too, that Rudy had received my greetings all through the past years, for the stars talked again to us and we sat and listened. The stars stepped out of the sky and began to shine within my heart, and I felt that 2 lights shone in my eyes as we walked hand in hand back to camp. We both had lost something. Our pen pals had left us, but we had found something more precious. The next day I found us happy and at ease with each other. We felt as if we had seen each other many times in the past. I showed him the beautiful countryside, and on high spirits we climbed some hills. Proudly I showed him off to my farmers. My motherly friend acted a little shy, but was impressed by all the brass and metals. She got busy, and in short time she had fixed sack lunches for us. She wouldn't listen to my suggestion to let us both help her with her work before we left. We strolled to my little hideout around the country where I had sat to write letters to him and dreamed of the time we would meet. Suddenly Rudy took me in his arms, his strong arms, to kiss me. I quickly freed myself from his arms and shook my head. Rudy looked utterly puzzled and distressed. Couldn't he understand? I knew that he had kissed many girls, but he couldn't he understand that it had to be different? For years we had treasured our friendship in something very special. Would it have to go as most war affairs did? Passion, kisses, jokes, fights, leaving the bitter taste in the mouth when it was over? Never. I couldn't fall in love, fall out, and fall in again, as some girls do. Maybe I was a dreamer, but I believed that someday there would be a great love in my life. I couldn't possibly end this unusual friendship with you, Rudy, in any cheap way or as any everyday love affair. Rudy's face was serious as he listened to my attempt to explain how I felt. Then, lifting my chin gently till I looked right into his eyes, he said, "Mary Ann, have I given you any reason to believe that I would like to use you in any cheap way or for a fleeting love affair? You have become a part of my life, my great inspiration. I cannot picture my life without you and your letters anymore. You are the type of girl I want to marry someday. Would you?" Had I heard right? He hadn't by any chance proposed to me. How could he? We had met each other just the day before. I buried my face in his shoulder and his arms gently enclosed me. I looked up. His eyes assured me that my heart had found the great love of my life. Yes, my heart had found its home. Later, as we lazed in the sun, he talked to me about our future together. Suddenly he said, "My little Hansi, here I am talking to you about our future home, and I am just realizing that I know hardly anything about you. All we do is talk about me and my life. Tell me about yourself, your childhood, your family." I shrugged my shoulders. What could I tell him about the little house by the woods? About my hayloft? Would he understand? He was the only son of a rich home. He had money, security, and luxuries of life, even during the war. Could I tell him of the time when Mother stood at the train station, worrying because I might forget God? How could he ever understand? He had a nominal Lutheran background, but religion meant nothing to him. He was a Nazi like me, and he trusted Hitler and the future of the Reich. No, there was not much to tell. Rudy, there is not much to tell about me. I am just a little orphan girl raised in a foster home. As you know, I was selected shortly after the German occupation of my country to be trained as a future youth leader. That training is my life. Everything centers around that goal. I never even thought about marriage because it would interfere with my plans. Wouldn't I let everybody down if I married? I must serve my country someday for all the free education I am getting. Rudy laughed happily. Well, Shotzi, why couldn't we do those things together? As soon as the war is over, I plan to go into as a merchant marine, and I will often be gone. You can fulfill your calling and teach. I will not demand all your time. I smiled, relieved. How simple everything was. How great and how simple. It was time to stop worrying and let go. The great moment of my young life had arrived. I had found my love, and I could trust myself in his hands. Rudy was intelligent, mature, and wise. He had the answers to all my problems, and I was a dumb little girl who couldn't stop worrying. But now I knew that somebody loved me, and for the first time I dared to love back. War, torpedoes, bombs, death, all seemed impossible as we sat in the flowering pasture with grazing cows on one side and stately evergreens on the other, and above us fluffy white clouds drifting in the bright summer sky over the hazy mountains. Maybe I was dreaming and would wake up to find everything gone and gray, but I would enjoy the dream while it lasted. With new confidence, I looked into Rudy's face. Then I looked at the golden band he had put on my finger. Rudy, the world you lived in seems very different from mine. I do not know if we two will ever be able to fuse our different worlds and backgrounds safely together to build a harmonious partnership, but Rudy, I am willing to try. As you meet my world, maybe you will learn to understand, and you might learn to love my world as I try to love your world. Little worryhead, stop philosophizing, laughed Rudy. Everything will be all right. Suddenly, like carefree children, we jumped up and ran across the pasture together. The next day we traveled together to Rudy's home. His parents were polite, though somewhat distant, for our engagement had taken his family and relatives by surprise. But we were too deeply entangled in the task of meeting each other really to care for anything or anybody but ourselves. How our time flew. We tried to ignore the fact that parting time was approaching, hoping that by ignoring it, we could stop the hour from coming. We had a little engagement party and red roses and fancy wines, which almost scared me in its richness and strangeness. Then Rudy and I sat in a buggy pulled by horses on the way to the train station. The little country train brought us rapidly to Breslau, capital of the province of Silesia. There are 2 trains were to leave in the afternoon in opposite directions. We arrived before noon, and Rudy took the opportunity to show me his beloved city during our few remaining hours together. For 7 years he had gone to school in Breslau. He knew every corner of the picturesque old place. We ate a few bites in a small cafe, paying not only with money but also with ration stamps provided by his mother. At last, the moment came when we had to return to the railroad station. For each other, we had put on smiles and made light-hearted conversation, trying to disguise how we felt about parting. Rudy had to leave first. After checking our suitcases, we walked down to the platform and found the train. Rudy's compartment was in the first class, reserved for the better element of society. Even during the days of total war, he reserved his place, stored his suitcase away, and stepped down once more from the train. I determined to be a brave sweetheart up to the minute of his leaving, and I forced a smile, trying to cheer me up. Rudy took me into his arms. Don't be sad, my little Hansi. We will see each other soon again. Be brave, my little girl. Meanwhile, and wait for me. We shall write each other every day. That did it. Hiding my face on his shoulder, I burst into uncontrollable sobbing. He pulled out his spotless white handkerchief and began to wipe my face tenderly. I looked up into his kind face, and again I felt premonition, that dreadful feeling of danger ahead, that I had known when I left my mother to go to the Nazi training. Why was I so afraid? I tried to control myself, but it was no use. I cried bitterly while my heart felt like a stone. The conductor raised the signal plate and drew the whistle. Rudy kissed me once more and then had to let me go and swing himself onto the already moving train. His face showed the strain of the hour and a deep concern for me. Struggling to calm myself, I finally managed to smile through my tears, but I could not speak. The train gathered speed, and Rudy's waving navy blue arm with golden stripes and stars grew smaller and dimmer in the distance. Even after the train had disappeared, I still waved. Then I stopped waving to wipe my tears and begin to search for my own train. How I found it and got on it, I couldn't remember later. Why would I ever see him again? Would he come back from war? What lay ahead of us? For a few short days I had experienced the warmth of love and joy of togetherness, the security of having found a home for my heart. All I could think of was Rudy. All I wanted was to be with him. But the trains rolled on into the evening, mine toward the east, his toward the west. Each minute tore us further apart, while the sun died and the day turned into a long night. War waited for him, and the big city called for me. I cherish the memory of some wonderful days and the slim golden ring on my finger. As I lifted my hand to feel his ring on my hot face, the gold metal felt cold and strange, just like my lonely heart. Train wheels sang again, and this is what they sang. Ish libe dish off. Well, I'll just tell you what it says. I love you, goodbye. I love you, beloved sailor, goodbye. And the next chapter is entitled Shattered.
Entitled what?
Shattered.
As in shattered? Oh my gosh.
Exciting, huh? No, it gets better. You think you were crying now, just wait. Yeah, that's why I can't read this stuff. It'd be worse than her. Well, as we studied the lesson today, there was so many quotes in the Ellen White notes that we didn't have time to get to. So I just wanted to cover a few of them right now, if that's okay. But I wanted to start here in Luke, I think chapter 8 and verse 40. If you want to turn there. And you know this is all about witnessing, right? This whole quarter. So this is basically the story of a man came to Jesus because his daughter was sick. And he asked him to come and heal his daughter. And as Jesus is going, a woman comes along that's been sick and had this issue of blood or whatever, bleeding for years, and nobody could, she spent all her money trying to be healed, right? And so the woman comes from behind him and she touches his garment, and immediately she's healed. And then Jesus says, "Who touched me?" Why did he say that? That's the question. Why did he? Okay, but
Why wouldn't they say that? They want to know.
do you want to put her on the spot?
He wanted her to say what had happened to her. He wanted her to witness.
To witness. There you go. He wanted her to witness. Yeah. That's why Jesus said, if you read on in verse 46, he says, "Somebody touched me, for I perceive virtue has gone out of me." And then when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling and falling down before him, and declared unto him and all the people for what cause she had touched him and how she was healed. And he said, "Daughter, be of good comfort, for thy faith has made thee whole." Amen. You see? It's for God wants you and I to witness of the good things that he does for us also. Susie?
Yeah, he didn't want her just to keep it to herself,
Yeah.
this great healing that he had done.
Well, and he wanted people to know that if they have faith, there's nothing that he won't do for them. I mean, she believed all she had to do was touch his garment, and she was made whole. Go ahead, Jerry.
I think also